many of you have been soaked in the Spirit? How many of you feel like an old dried bean? Just asking. Some of you look like an old dried bean, but I was reading on the internet. Weird story comes up. I'm there. I'm the first one there. And they said they had a story of the 10 craziest naval disasters. 10 craziest naval disasters. Number 7 particularly caught my eye. Number 7. It seems that one of these big freighters up in Michigan somewhere, who knows, way up north or whatever in the Midwest, they loaded the freighter with dried beans. Like 200 million tons of dried beans. The whole ship. Stem to stern, top to bottom, beans. And they were sailing this ship to Chicago through the Great Lakes. Well, it was November-ish, and we all know what happens in the Great Lakes in November. They get those storms and nor'easters and stuff like that, and they blow against them. And some of those storms up there are every bit as bad as our hurricanes. I mean, they just get horrific, and many a good ship have gone down in those storms. Anyway, this ship was sailing, the captain and his crew and all that, getting these beans to Chicago. Somehow, Chicago needed beans. So they were taking beans to Chicago, and the storm was brutal, and the waves crashing over the boat. Well, what they did not know was a couple of the venti doodle things that they vent the bilge with and all that were left open. They were not battened down, as they say. And as the waves continue to crash over for hours and hours, days and at night, water was filling that boat up. And suddenly they realized, hey, we're taking on water because the boat's getting heavier and slower and sinking in the water. And the captain's concerned. They're running around trying to figure all this out. So they got, 45 miles to get to Chicago, and they're trying, and they're running around, close everything, close this, check that, do this, that. At first they thought maybe a bulkhead had caved in or something. The storm is buffeting, banging the ship all over the ocean. Lake Michigan there. Anyway, they finally make it to Chicago. They finally do. Roll in, dock up next to the pier there. Got the ship all tied down, everything secure, all the weather taken on and all this stuff. And it took them all night long, but they got it done. They got it ready. They got it safe to Chicago. And after everything was secure, everything was battened down, everything was tied, the captain gave the crew leave. Said, we're in Chicago, you guys can go have leave. And the captain stayed on board for a while, but then he too had family in Chicago, so he battened everything down, locked everything up, left the ship and went. Well, they came back the next morning, and the ship was sunk. The ship was sitting in the bottom of the harbor. What had happened is all those little dried beans that were soaked in water began to expand. And they literally cracked to the bottom of the ship. So much power and pressure in those beans cracked the ship. It finished filling with water, and down she went. And there it sat in the Chicago harbor at the bottom in 50 feet of water. Tell me again how you sank your ship. Beans. Never underestimate the power of a good bowl of beans. We all know that, don't we? Especially you men. The power of a single little bean that will expand 2 and 3 times its size when you bathe it in some water. That's amazing. You put a few black-eyed peas in a bowl, you come back the next day. Amazing. The power of a simple dried bean. How many of you feel like simple dried beans? You'd be amazed what a little soaking in the Spirit can do. To fill you with a new power. In fact, almost a dynamite force. if you're willing. We're going to talk about that this morning. Jesus gives us this little story here. Of all the stories, this is an event. There's no teaching here per se. Other than Jesus is racked out in the back of the boat. A storm whipped up. They're in trouble. The guys are scared. They wake up Jesus and said, "Don't you care?" Wow, that's the wrong question to ask Jesus. And Jesus says, "Watch this. Be still." Immediately. And even the boys went, "Okay. I'm going to sit over here now. Who is this that even the wind and the water will obey?" Oh my goodness, you're in the power of the Lord. You're in the presence of the Lord. You're filled with the Spirit of the Lord. Watch these little beams explode. We're going to talk about that this morning. First, I want you to stand up one final time.